we turn to one of those strong theories of rights. What we turn to today is libertarianism. Libertarianism takes individual rights seriously. It's called libertarianism because it says the fundamental individual right is the right to liberty. Precisely because we are separate individual beings, we're not available to any use that the society might desire or devise. Precisely because we are individual, separate human beings, we have a fundamental right to liberty. And that means a right to choose freely, to live our lives as we please, provided we respect other people's rights to do the same. That's the fundamental idea. Robert Nozick, one of the libertarian philosophers we read for this course, puts it this way: individuals have rights. So strong and far-reaching are these rights that they raise the question of what, if anything, the state may do. So what does libertarianism say about the role of government or of the state? Well, there are three things that most modern states do that, on the libertarian theory of rights, are illegitimate, are unjust. One of them is paternalist legislation. That's passing laws that protect people from themselves. Seatbelt laws, for example, or motorcycle helmet laws. The libertarian says it may be a good thing if people wear seatbelts, but that should be up to them. And the state, the government, has no business coercing them, us, to wear seatbelts by law. It's coercion. So no paternalist legislation, number one. Number two, no morals legislation. Many laws try to promote the virtue of citizens or try to give expression to the moral values of the society as a whole. Libertarians say that's also a violation of the right to liberty. Take the example of, well, a classic example of legislation offered in the name of promoting morality, traditionally, have been laws that prevent sexual intimacy between gays and lesbians. The libertarian says, nobody else is harmed, nobody else's rights are violated, so the state should get out of the business entirely of trying to promote virtue or to enact morals legislation. And the third kind of law or policy that is ruled out on the libertarian philosophy is any taxation or other policy that serves the purpose of redistributing income or wealth from the rich to the poor. Redistribution is if you think about it, says the libertarian, is a kind of coercion. What it amounts to is theft by the state or by the majority, if we're talking about a democracy, from people who happen to do very well and earn a lot of money. Now, Nozick and other libertarians allow that there can be a minimal state that taxes people for the sake of what everybody needs: the national defense, police force, judicial system to enforce contracts and property rights. But that's it. Who's the wealthiest person in the United States? Wealthiest person in the world? Bill Gates. It is. That's right. Here he is. You'd be happy too. Now, what's his net worth? Anybody have any idea? Somebody else figured out how much does he get paid on an hourly basis. And so they figured out since he began Microsoft, suppose he worked, 14 hours per day. Reasonable guess. And you calculate this net wealth. It turns out that his rate of pay is over $150, not per hour, not per minute, $150, more than $150 per second. Which means that if on his way to the office, Gates noticed a $100 bill on the street, it wouldn't be worth his time to stop and pick it up. Now, most of you will say, someone that wealthy, surely we can tax them to meet the pressing needs of people who lack an education or lack enough to eat or lack decent housing. They need it more than he does. And if you were a utilitarian, what would you do? What tax policy would you have? You'd redistribute in a flash, wouldn't you? But he did pretty well for himself. You want to see Michael Jordan? There he is. His income alone in 1 year was $31 million, and then he made another $47 million in endorsements for Nike and other companies. So his income was, in 1 year, $78 million. To require him to pay, let's say, a third of his earnings to the government to support good causes like food and healthcare and housing and education for the poor, that's coercion. That's unjust. That violates his rights. And that's why redistribution is wrong. Now, how many agree with that argument? Agree with the libertarian argument that redistribution for the sake of trying to help the poor is wrong? And how many disagree with that argument? All right, let's begin with those who disagree. What's wrong with the libertarian case against redistribution? Yes.
I think these people like Michael Jordan have received, we're talking about working within a society, and they received a larger gift from the society, and they have a larger obligation in return to give that through redistribution. You know, you can say that Michael Jordan may work just as hard as someone who works, doing laundry 12 hours, 14 hours a day, but he's receiving more. I don't think it's fair to say that, it's all on his inherent, hard work.
All right. Let's hear from defenders of libertarianism. Why would it be wrong in principle to tax the rich to help the poor? Go ahead.
My name's Joe, and I collect skateboards. I've since bought 100 skateboards. I live in a society of 100 people. I'm the only one with skateboards. Suddenly, everyone decides they want a skateboard. They come into my house, they take 99 of my skateboards. I think that is unjust. Now, I think in certain circumstances, it becomes necessary to overlook that injustice, perhaps condone that injustice, as in the case of the cabin boy being killed for food. If people are on the verge of dying, perhaps it is necessary to overlook that injustice, but I think it's important to keep in mind that we're still committing injustice by taking people's belongings or assets.
Are you saying that taxing Michael Jordan, say at a 33% tax rate, for good causes, to feed the hungry, is theft?
I think it's unjust. Yes, I do believe it's theft, but perhaps it is necessary to condone that theft.
But it's theft.
Yes.
Why is it theft, Joe?
Because...
Why is it like your collection of skateboards?
It's theft because, at least in my opinion and by the libertarian opinion, he earned that money fairly. and it belongs to him. So to take it from him is by definition theft.
All right, let's hear if there's, who wants to reply to Joe? Yes, go ahead.
I don't think this is necessarily a case in which you have 99 skateboards and the government, or you have 100 skateboards and the government's taking 99 of them. It's like you have more skateboards than there are days in a year. You have more skateboards than you're going to be able to use in your entire lifetime, and the government is taking part of those. And I think that if you're operating in a society in which the government doesn't redistribute wealth, that allows for people to amass so much wealth that people who haven't started from the equal footing in our hypothetical situation that doesn't exist in our real society get undercut for the rest of their lives.
So you're worried that if there isn't some degree of redistribution, if some are left at the bottom, there will be no genuine equality of opportunity. All right? The idea that taxation is theft. Nozick takes that point one step further. He agrees that it's theft. He's more demanding than Joe. Joe says it is theft. Maybe in an extreme case it's justified. Maybe a parent is justified in stealing a loaf of bread to feed his or her hungry family. So Joe is what would you call yourself, a compassionate quasi-libertarian? Nozick says, if you think about it, taxation amounts to the taking of earnings. In other words, it means taking the fruits of my labor. But if the state has the right to take my earnings or the fruits of my labor, isn't that morally the same as, according to the state, the right to claim a portion of my labor? So taxation actually is morally equivalent to forced labor, because forced labor involves the taking of my leisure, my time, my efforts, just as taxation takes the earnings that I make with my labor. And so for Nozick and for the libertarians, taxation for redistribution is theft, as Joe says, but not only theft, it's morally equivalent to laying claim to certain hours of a person's life and labor. So it's morally equivalent to forced labor. If the state has a right to claim the fruits of my labor, that implies that it really has an entitlement to my labor itself. And what is forced labor? Forced labor, Nozick points out, is what? Is slavery. Because if I don't have the right, the sole right to my own labor, then that's really to say that the government or the political community is a part owner in me. And what does it mean for the state to be a part owner in me? If you think about it, it means that I'm a slave, that I don't own myself. So what this line of reasoning brings us to is the fundamental principle that underlies the libertarian case for rights. What is that principle? It's the idea that I own myself. It's the idea of self-possession. If you want to take rights seriously, if you don't want to just regard people as collections of preferences, the fundamental moral idea to which you will be led is the idea that we are the owners or the proprietors of our own person. And that's why utilitarianism goes wrong. And that's why it's wrong to yank the organs from that healthy patient. You're acting as if that patient belongs to you or to the community, but we belong to ourselves. And that's the same reason that it's wrong to make laws to protect us from ourselves, or to tell us how to live, to tell us what virtues we should be governed by. And that's also why it's wrong to tax the rich, to help the poor, even for good causes, even to help those who were displaced by the Hurricane Katrina.